Okay, Job part 2. Before we start, I saw there were a couple questions. Williams, did you want to ask a question? Williams, are you here? Not yet. Okay. All right, let us proceed. So, I promised you this poll. So how many of you, just put your hand in the screen, how many of you were satisfied with God's answer to Job? Put your hand in the screen. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, how many of you were not satisfied with his answer to Job? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we have a tie. Okay, so let's start with those who were not satisfied. Tell us a little bit what disturbed you about this answer. Edmonds, go ahead.
Yeah, so we actually talked about this a bit in our group at the very beginning of class, but pretty much my issue with it is that you go through this whole thing, 40 pages worth of their arguments, their theological beliefs. Job says all of this stuff that he's frustrated because God is this, unreachable judge, jury, and executioner. And then, the prophet Elihu comes in and says, he speaks to you in dreams and he speaks to you through pain. And then finally God steps in and he's like, yeah, well, I'm really just this great guy. You shouldn't even question me. I've done all these things that you can't even imagine. And that's that. There's no sort of explanation of why he's right or why innocent people suffer bad things, right? I mean, that's the true question at the crux of this, right? Why do innocent people suffer from evil? And we never get a real answer. I know O was more satisfied with that. He pretty much said that it's sort of an explanation of just how much you need to have faith. But I think that works if you already have faith. And if you don't have faith, if you're reading this to try and figure it out for yourself, it doesn't really give you the answer you're looking for.
Okay, very good. Yes, it does seem two things you say, right? And you guys can write this down. This is problematic. Number one, it doesn't answer the question. It's like a person doing, like a bad student, right? Doing a test where there's a test question and he doesn't know the answer. So he's going to talk about everything he does know. I know you guys do that. We all do that, right? So God seems like a bad student answer. Second thing, it's like he's on this ego trip. Look what I did. Look what I, like this, pumping up his muscles, being, did you forget who I am? Do you know who I am? This is who I am. Who are you? Basically, right? You could read the whole story like that. Excellent. Very good. Anybody else want to talk about how this it was unsatisfactory? And then we'll get to those who think it was satisfactory. Who else wants to add to this general dissatisfaction with God's answer? Anybody else? Okay. Now, those who think it was a legitimate, actually, let me just add, since there's no one else, let me summarize, right? This is a negative view, which is the view actually of a number of theologians, right? Elie Wiesel actually is one of those who doesn't like that answer. If you know Elie Wiesel, he's Nobel Prize of Peace, right? Who wrote The Night, yes, Anderson. And he has written a number of other texts where he takes biblical characters and kind of reveals some hidden aspects that we haven't seen. And when he gets to the story of Job, he's actually on Job's side and he thinks it's not Job who should be judged, it's God who should be judged for his actions, right? So he agrees in his works that, God actually this is an inappropriate answer and that God needs to be put on the stand and judged for what he did to Job, right? So a number of people agree with you guys. There's two problems, right? There's the content where he doesn't respond, and there's the tone, which is the tone of a bully, of somebody trying to, show that he's bigger than you, to shut you down. And there is kind of an effect of shutting Job down, because interestingly, after that, he has a kind of a mousy response, like, oh yes, everybody knows that you are the greatest, I will therefore shut up, right? So very uncharacteristic of Job, right? So excellent. Now, those who like the answer, are you able to redeem this in any way, what we just talked about? Is there a way to work around that? Rudolph, go ahead.
I'm finding it satisfactory exactly for the reason that the result is open-ended, that there is no answer. It requires us, the Job to dig deeper, to look for more challenges, to question ourselves more, to be more insecure, to become more humble. And, you know, after I read the text on Sunday, there was the last paragraphs left, and I went onto YouTube. There was an animated series for, I would think, children perhaps, where Job was animated in a 5-minute little YouTube thingy. The interesting thing was that when the initial conversation between Satan and God occurs, God, even in that little animation, is the big, the mighty, the huge, the gigantuan kind of character. And Satan is depicted as this very muscular superhero guy, but only an inch big. So, you know, sneaky little Satan is all around, and there is just no answer where he is. And there's more to the story. It's silly, but it's really meant for somebody who has a rudimentary understanding of the passage to kind of get an idea what the story is all about. And I think if we don't get an answer, we just become more alert and challenge ourselves to be more on the lookout for these little Satans that are everywhere.
Okay, good. So if I summarize what you said, is that there's an open-endedness, there's an invitation to dig, and perhaps to dig in the text, which is what we're going to do, right? So I definitely, the text, remember, this is, again, wisdom literature. Nothing is as it seems. There's things we need to dig in order to get somewhere. It's not going to be given to us on a platter, right? Very good. I like that. Who else? Anderson, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess to add on to what Rudolph said, I guess, like, how could you even get an answer to that, right? Because, I mean, if we're talking about God, and, like, I guess, like, Job's problem is, like, all this horrible stuff is happening to him, and he needs to know why, because he's been, you know, a decent person his whole life. So, and he's been rewarded as such up until that moment when God decides to test him, right? So, I guess the question now is, like, how could you can't really answer it, because, at least through, like, the classic world, or the worldview that was depicted before. So, like, as far as, like, God's answer is concerned, like, the reason I'm, like, satisfied with it is because, like, I don't know, I guess he talks about, like, everything except why he allowed all this stuff to happen, which is, like, I don't know, that's like a way of, I guess, painting a picture of, like, what it is he means, rather than, like, saying it outright. Like, so it's more of, like, a thing that you just have to kind of come up with your own answer for, because, you know, it's a pretty open-ended answer, I think. So
Excellent, Anderson. Yeah. Excellent. 2 points that I'm taking from what you're saying. Asking for a clear answer is still being in the old paradigm, right? Of everything is clear, everything makes sense. But here we're moving in a different paradigm, right? Which is not a logical paradigm, right? Second thing you said, Anderson, which I'm gonna take in a second, is that God is painting a landscape more than giving an answer. He's creating an atmosphere, and we have to begin to see behind the images, right? God is really like a painter, and we'll talk about this in a second. And we need to start to interpret the painting in order to get to some kind of an answer. But it's not going to be a P therefore Q answer that we expect in the old paradigm. This is a new paradigm, and we should expect something more. It's a different approach, right? Very good. So I really like that, Anderson. Excellent. Who else wants to add? Rudolph, conclude for us.
Just a short addition to what you just said. I like the idea of comparing this to a painting. Interpreting art is something very subjective. Many have tried to put a certain level of objectivity to the definition of art, but what we see is what we see. We all have our own views, and I think in this case it translates into us just simply not being able to meaningfully justifying who or what God is. We never will be.
Excellent. I think you're adding to what Anderson said, right? That art is a subjective interpretation. All of us are going to get a different answer from this landscape, right? So let's go there. Let's go there. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to invite you for a deeper reading of the text, right? So we know on the surface it doesn't make sense. He's not answering the question. He's being straight up rude, right? But what I want us to do for the remaining time is to begin to, first of all, visualize this landscape that God is painting, because that's what he's doing. He's painting everything that he has created. He's like, I did this, and there is that, and there is that, and there is this, right? And then we need to learn to read between the lines. What is the message, the subliminal message that God is trying to convey to us with regards to suffering? So, okay, so this is a tricky section. So pay attention. I know it's the end of the day, but I want to go, first of all, I want to look at two things. I want to look at the tone of God, and then actually, let me skip the tone. Let's go straight to the painting. Okay, so the painting. Okay, so what we're having here through the painting, and what I'm going to ask you to do is to imagine that God is telling something about himself through this painting, right? So he's not answering clearly the question, right? Why did you do this to me? Because this question assumes that God is doing this to him. Are you following? Let me say that again. The question is wrongly formulated and perhaps based on a false premise that God is the origin of Job's suffering, and that's why Job is asking, why are you doing this to me? But what if God was completely different? What if God had nothing to do with this? What if there was a whole different reality that God inhabited, right? And so because the question, make sure you write this down, the question of Job is based on a false premise of who God is simply going to give a new vision of who he is to Job. And that will resolve the question. Are you seeing what I'm saying? This is really important. Put your hand in the screen if you're following what I just said. Okay, so Job's question is based on a certain concept of God as judge, punisher, person who puts you on trial, and therefore he wants to know, why are you punishing me? And God is like, yo, you got it all wrong. This is not who I am. Here's who I am. And at the moment Job gets this powerful revelation of God, he falls silent because the question is not relevant anymore in light of that vision. So what I'm going to invite you to do now is we're going to see what Job saw, right? And so before we can see this new vision of God, we need to remind ourselves the old vision of God. So let's do that right now. 3 things. I'm just going to write them down from the prologue that we're getting. Old vision of God. I'm going to write them in the chat. Number 1. First thing we know about God in the prologue is that he is a rigid, narrow-minded God, right? With this notion of there are rules and they must be followed, right? And we see Job seeing God in that way, especially when he sees his children going to a party and he's like, whoa, they might sin. Therefore, let me quickly do the right sacrifice so they are atoned for. Right? These are the rules. This is the ritual. And God is this kind of God. I sin, I die. I don't sin, I live. Rigid, narrow-minded God. Are you following that? This is how Job used to see God, right? In the prologue. Everybody got that? Put your hand in the screen. Very important to get these 3 points so you can really see the contrast, right? Second thing we see so that was point 1. Second thing we see, we have a predictable God. Right? I do the right thing, you bless me. Vending machine God, right? If I do this, then you do that, right? And then we have the last point, we have a kind of a death-giving God, right? Suffering-giving God, punitive God, right? That's the one we have in the prologue. Now, as we go into this painting, this landscape that God is doing of his own creation, right? He's depicting certain types of animals, doing certain types of things. And as you read between the lines of this painting, you should be able to begin to see the contrasting vision. So let's begin. Point 1, rigid, narrow-minded God. What is the new atmosphere that is opening up? How are we feeling in this new space that God is depicting? What kind of God are we sensing behind the scenes of that landscape that would contrast a rigid, narrow-minded God? Rudolph.
Apologies, I should have taken my hand down. I'm sorry, I was just writing. I was not answering your question.
All right, so let me say it again, right? So we have rigid, narrow-minded God in the prologue, where God seems to be really focused on the sin and the transgression, right? And so we are focused on the sin and the transgression, right? This God is like, ooh, he sinned, let me kill him. Oh, he didn't sin, let me bless him, right? So this is a God focused on sin, focused on transgression, very, right? You have to walk the line, you have to be yashar, don't move here, don't move there, right? What sense are you getting in this new landscape where you have the wild animals, you have let me read you a little bit. Let's do that. I'll read you a little bit and you tell me what's the atmosphere. Where does it start? Somebody, what chapter? I don't even know. Somebody tell me where God starts speaking, please. 37, 30, somebody please. What chapter does God begin to speak?
I think it's 37 or 38.
I think 38.
38.
Yeah.
Yeah, then the Lord replied to Job. Okay, I'm going to read a little bit. Tell me if you're sensing rigidity or something else, okay? So he starts, right? Who is this who darkens my counsel? He's kind of, responding to Job a little bit aggressively. And then he begins, where were you where I laid the earth's foundation? Speak if you have understanding. Do you know who fixed its dimensions or measured it with a line? Who closed the sea behind doors? Who, when it gushed forth out of the womb? Have you ever commanded the day to break, assigned the dawn its place? Have you penetrated to the sources of the sea or walked in the recesses of the deep? What is the sense are you getting? Narrow or wide as you're reading this? Spacious or constricted? Very good. I'm seeing gestures, right? There's an expansion here. Look at the dawn. Look at the sources. Look at the sea, the origin of the heavens, right? First thing I'm seeing here, just the atmosphere is an atmosphere of spaciousness, right? And so here we were in a very narrow, oh, I have to be careful not to sin. And God is like, look up, right? Look at the space that you're inhabiting. Expand yourself, breathe, right? See the origin and the end of all things. Why are you stuck in a kind of, how do you call it? Short-sighted view of who I am, right? So the first thing I'm noticing, just reading the text and kind of tasting or sensing or smelling the atmosphere of the text for number one, is that we have here expansion, broadness, right? As though God is inviting Job to open his perspective, right? That's what I'm seeing here, right? As though he's telling him, stop being so afraid of doing the wrong thing, right? Let me write this down. Stop being so afraid of messing up, right? Here is Job so intent on not sinning and really missing the powerful, broad, expansive vision of what life is, as though God is telling him, stop being so small. Come out and breathe, come out and live, enter the world. Don't be afraid to stumble. Don't be afraid to be challenged. Don't be afraid to find pleasure and beauty, but also suffering and trials. This is life, enter it. Are you seeing what's going on? This is an invitation for Job to expand, right? Stop being so what's the word? Somebody say it for me in English.
Myopic?
Myopic.
How you spell it? Like that?
MYOPIC. No.
Oh,
Myopic.
Myopic.
Yep.
Is that how you say it? Someone say it, please.
Yeah, myopic.
Myopic. Okay, exactly. Stop being so myopic or short-sighted, right? The world is open for you. Enter it. That's what I'm seeing in this beginning text, right? The world is open for you. Enter it. Don't be afraid. And don't hold back. And so many times, right, especially if we come from a religious background like Job, we are afraid to really enter life. We are afraid of making a mistake. We are afraid of being with the wrong person, of going into the wrong place, of dating this person, of traveling over here, of reading this book, of listening to this music. And God is like, breathe, right? Open up. The world is open, ready for you. Explore it, enter it, penetrate it. Stop being so afraid of stumbling. Stumble, so what? Pick yourself up, move on. Right? So this is very close, by the way. I'm hearing Nietzsche here when he says, beautiful quote, God is dead. But then he continues, the sea, the open sea lies before us, right? There's a quote from Nietzsche. I think this is a Nietzschean God that we are seeing here. God is telling Job, you know, the old God is dead. The old patriarchal, legalistic view of God that you had is dead. Now the sea, the open sea lies before you. Enter and meet the true God, right? And we'll see what that true God looks like. Are you all seeing what I'm seeing? Put your hand if you're with me, right? Okay. Second one, let's see what you can come up with for the second one. We have in the second one a predictable, right? God. What do we see here? What are you learning from the type of animals that God is painting? Well, first of all, tell me, what type of animals that God paint in this painting? Is he talking about roosters, chickens, dogs, cats? What kind of animals, Rudolph?
Well, it's the hippopotamus and the crocodile. Very powerful animal, and both very powerful animals and predators.
And something else also. Is the crocodile in your backyard?
No, of course not.
Can you tame the crocodile?
No.
That's where we are, right? God is picking animals that we cannot tame. They're the wildest, most remote, most dangerous, most challenging animals that he could find. He even talks about the Leviathan, which is a huge like dragon type thing, dinosaur maybe, right? He's saying, no, look beyond the coop where you're in, right? This is who I am. I am the alligator. I am the hippo. I am the wild goat over here. I am the wild bull that you... What is God telling him about himself when he's quoting all these wild animals? What do you think is the subliminal message? What is he saying about his nature when he's choosing for his painting wild, remote, uncontrollable, unmanageable animals? What does it tell us about God's nature? This choice of animals. So we have Olivera, and then Williams, and then Giannakopoulos.
So the same way the animals act uncontrollable, like at the creation of God, and what happens on this material world would escape his control. It's more like a force that evolves and happens more than it's something that is like it's an action that takes place intentionally.
Okay, so in other words, are you saying that God is kind of more like this type of force than he is a force that can be managed?
Yeah.
Okay, absolutely, right? Let's go on to who else, everybody else, and then I'll conclude what, Giannakopoulos, go ahead, and then Williams.
You know, it's like he's telling Job, hey, you see these animals that you have no authority over, animals that if you were to go one-on-one with, they would absolutely destroy you, right? You couldn't tame them. You couldn't beat them. You know, these animals, I created them. Saying, I have this much authority over them. I created them. You know, so who are you to even ask, you know?
So what does these animals tell you about God's nature, though? Remember, the portrait, the landscape is reflective of who God is, right? There is a connection between the painter and the painting. So what does this landscape tell you about God? What do you think, Giannakopoulos?
That he's powerful, wide, and what's the word? Like, not creative, I guess creative, but he's intricate, you know? Nothing simple.
Okay, good. You're on the right track. Williams, conclude us.
Oh, I was going to say that God is basically saying that he's the unseen hand and that he's basically everywhere, because he gives you the example of not just the animals, but the entire valleys, streams, and rivers. And it basically means that he's telling you he's omniscient, but he's telling you he's a beneficent, omniscient being. So like the animals is just that God could be mad. He could attack you at any point, but he doesn't have to.
Oh, I like that. Very good. God is like those animals. Could attack you, but doesn't have to. Excellent. Rudolph.
Well, you see Nietzsche in certain passages there. I see Leibniz and his idea of theodicy there. It's that question, that running after trying to find meaning, which actually is the suffering, which actually causes God. There is no way for us to even comprehend the gigantic meaning of that endless God that created all this, or that's out there. He not only created the universe, he created what became before the universe, before the Big Bang. He created the idea of the Big Bang and before, endless.
Good.
So there is this idea of, we cannot possibly fathom ever why we are in pain. We try to find an answer to it, but we cannot. There is no way, unless we embrace that there is something bigger than us. There is no way for us to justify why we're in pain.
Very good. Right, what we're seeing here is a depiction of a wild God. A God who cannot be controlled, manipulated. What's the word? I do this, therefore you do that. Remember, that was the transaction, right, that we had. Job thought, if I do all the right things, God will bend to my desires. And God is saying, I don't bend, right? You think you could control me and manipulate me with your virtue? That's not who I am, right? I will do what I will do, and I will be what I will be. And sometimes I'm not just going to cuddle you, right? Like you thought. I sometimes am also going to challenge you and rip you apart so that you can grow, right? This is what we're seeing. We're seeing a ferocious God, right? A wild God, untamable God, who sometimes will tear us apart for the sake of our own growth. God is not just there to cuddle us. He's not just there to protect us. He's not just there to make us feel happy and safe and loved, right? God will sometimes tear you into pieces, and for good reason, right? So at least we're seeing the way Job is, making his way through this terrible ordeal, right? So here we are confronted with a wild God, ferocious God, but also, and this is the last one I want to look at, this is the last one where we had a death-giving punitive, right? Giving God, death-giving and punitive. What we are seeing in this last thing is that ferocious, wild, expansive, but life-giving, right? This is the main thing to get from this. This is what I am sensing when I'm reading this text. I am sensing that it is pulsing with life and with oxygen and with power and with vitality. It is as though God is telling Job, who has become dust and ashes, arise. Here is the cosmic breath that I'm breathing back into you through this discourse, right? God, by speaking these, by uttering all of these life-giving images, right? By uttering all of this, this expansiveness, this wildness, this ferociousness, this vitality, is actually breathing life back into Job. This is the last thing that I'm getting right from this passage, right? This is a text which is profoundly life-giving, right? Profoundly life-giving. There is so much vitality, right? Breath, oxygen in this text. Life, right? That it seems like, yes, God is not answering directly, but it's like the power of his breath, right, is renewing Job and making him a new creature, right? So, and when you look even at the type of animals, a lot of these animals, by the way, are females giving birth, right? You have a whole semantic field of birth in this landscape, as though God is telling Job, here I am rebirthing you through the travails of suffering. yes, you're suffering. It seems like it's the end, but what I'm really doing is birthing a new self. I'm birthing your new self. And yes, it goes through pain, but ultimately what I'm doing here is breathing life into you. Are you sensing this atmosphere of life that is being kind of breathed on Job? Did you see? This is literary analysis, right? This is not like literal, oh, I am giving you back life. No, he's not saying that, right? He's breathing it because the atmosphere is so vital. It's so energized. It's so full of life and vitality and birth, right? That I am sensing here that God is telling Job, I am the birther. I am not the judge. I am not the punisher. I am not the one who kills. I am the one who helps you go through this and be birthed anew. Let me say that again, because that's the punchline, right? I am not who you think I was, right? I am not the judge. I'm not, hold on, I'm writing this down. I am not the punisher, right? I am your birther. I birth you through the travails of your suffering. So you see how it's a completely different vision of God than what we had at the beginning. At that moment, the question of why are you torturing me is irrelevant, which is why Job falls silent, right? There's a kind of ecstasy there where he realizes how small his image of God was and how powerfully beautiful and revitalizing this new vision is, right? Okay, let me see your comments. So Edmonds and then Giannakopoulos.
So I really liked that explanation. And I thought, specifically what Rudolph said was very, very, clear. I do feel that, it's sort of either, if he has the authority, he has the authority, but it doesn't really answer this question as to, why he has this power, how can we trust that he uses it responsibly? The answer is, well, trust me, right? I have this experience, I have this knowledge. I'm not a judge, I'm not a punisher, but I am, everything. But I still feel like it's, if you say that, it's sort of, it just has to be accepted, right? There's no option to sort of question it or anything like that, anything to go a little deeper than that. Because there's no justification. He says, I don't have to justify myself, essentially. And maybe that's just something that feels a little bit out of line with what we expect today, in such a, maybe democratic law-based society, but it feels just very off to have this person say, take me at my word. I know what I'm talking about. And, I might make these decisions you don't like, but you just have to trust me. It's what I want, right? It's what I'm saying is right.
Careful, because
and I think that's just difficult.
I don't think at any point he tells Job, I know what you should do and trust me. This is the old way, right? Be careful. You're overlapping, right? This new way I'm seeing simply as an invitation into something broader, right? This is God inviting Job into not only a new vision of what it means to be a human being, what it means to be truly alive. I think it's an invitation to get to know a different God, right? So so there is no affirmation, this is who I am and therefore you, right? This is just like, here's this whole new space I'm opening up for you. And you don't know any of it because it's wild and free and broad, but I invite you to enter into this new perspective, new horizon, right? So if you're still saying, oh, God is affirming himself and telling us this is the old.
I hear you. Right? I agree. It is a new God, and I think it's a different perspective. It's not, you do this, I'm going to punish you. And that I like that. That's good. But it also means that, as opposed to the very administrative sort of way that we could understand his actions before, instead of being able to think, oh, well, just like the analogy of, say, some sort of judge in today's society, it's easy. We have a written code of rules, and that way it makes it so that you can't just be punished for something arbitrarily. This new God doesn't follow those rules. He doesn't have that. And I think that makes it better in some ways because it's a little more personal, but it also makes it more difficult to accept because it's not, you get punished and maybe you have no idea why.
You got it. You got it. It's complete unknown. This is
Yeah.
the life of faith versus the life of works, right?
Right.
You don't know, when you enter the wild, you don't know what's going to hit you, right? If you've ever gone hiking to some, I don't know, a national park, you could get eaten up by, so you don't know what you're going to see, right? So this is,
That's very true.
you're sensing it correctly. There is an unknown, there is almost a threat, but there's also an invitation. And it's really, I think you're right on. It's not administrative, it's not clear, it's not clear cut, it's not this, therefore this. And so it's scary. But at the same time, from the many images of birth, we can be slightly reassured that it's going in the direction of birth and not death, right?
Right.
Yes, you're sensing it correctly. It's scary, it's a challenge, it's unknown, it's out of our control. And yes, that's what God is telling Job. I invite you into this new space. You don't know yet anything about it, but I invite you to enter and see for yourself, right? So yes, you really got it. Thank you, Edmonds. Okay, Christodoulou and then Giannakopoulos.
I thought it was really interesting, the point about like God having an unrestricted power and like being uncomfortable with it. Like we are so interested today about like constitutionalism, and it's because like it is a limit on a human power, but we have to like make the leap and realize like this is something beyond human that has unlimited power, that can handle it, let's say. But like humans, we need limitations, and it's the story like we've gone through before.
Yeah, we are as Westerners uncomfortable with royalty, right? We are uncomfortable with transcendence. And this is what, in a way, Islam has maintained, I think, is a sense of transcendence that other religions have democratized a little bit, right? So yes, there is a powerful sense of beyond you, right? And yes, this is part of this new vision that we as Westerners who are democratic, who want everybody to be equal, including God, are afraid. Whoa, what? This is beyond me. I don't know if I'm ready for this, right? So yes, you're sensing it very well, Christodoulou. Very nice. Giannakopoulos.
So the thing about Job is that, he thought that he knew God wholeheartedly, right? He thought that he knew everything there was to know about God. And so with that happening, he became very prideful, and he thought he knew how to play the game. But when you think that you think you know God, then you don't know God, because if you were to actually know God 100%, then that would be like idol worshiping.
Yes, excellent.
You know,
yes.
Because he can't know God. He's not so small, right? And that's why there is no game to play. And that's why we kind of just have to, I forgot who was saying it, but it was Edmonds. We kind of just have to accept it. That's how it is. We have to put our pride down and say, okay, God has this power over us, and that's just how it is, And then letting down our pride, we're able to get higher.
Okay, good. In fact, I'm reminded, as you were talking, all of you are familiar with the Chronicles of Narnia and C.S. Lewis, right? So there's a beautiful passage when the little girl, the youngest, meets for the first time the lion, Aslan, who is a representation of God, right? And she's so impressed, and she turns to the, gnome or elf that is with her, and she says, oh, is he safe? And the little gnome answers, of course not, but he's good. Right? So this is such an accurate Job-like description. At least it fits perfect. It's not safe. The walk with God is not going to occur according to your comfort zone, according to your calculations, according to what you wanted for yourself. In that sense, it's not safe, right? It's not going to work according to your 10-year plan, right? It's going to be different, but it's going to be good. I think this is, the most beautiful thing or existential thing we can draw from this passage. If you want any words of comfort today, right? This type of God that is calling out or beckoning to Job is saying, I'm not going to fit with your plans, right? I'm not going to keep you in your comfort zone, and your plans are not my plans. I have maybe different plans. You should expect things to go differently from what you expected, but it will be better in the end than anything that you have dreamed, right? So yes, it's scary because I'm not in control. It's not going to work according to my 10-year plan, and it's going to destroy everything I wanted to do the next, right? But it's going to bring me in a better, more spacious space than this narrow space that I was in before with my 10-year plan, right? So that's, I think, one of the main things we can gather from this text, is that God is inviting us into the unknown, into something better than our narrow plans, right? But it's scary. And no one wants to lose control like that, like Edmonds was saying, right? This is not administrative, right? Very good. Let's see, one last comment and then we'll go to the epilogue. No comments, yay, okay. Good, let's go to the epilogue because Christodoulou is dying. So maybe he can catch. And yes, I think someone just wrote Williams, right? Man plans and God laughs. Yes, excellent. Okay, the epilogue, very quickly. So, most traditions look at the epilogue and they deduce from the epilogue, oh, Job was faithful, and see, God rewards him in the end. And we see again the ending looking strangely like the beginning. Watch this. Let's go to the epilogue. Someone give me the chapter. I'm not used to reading Job in actual Bible. What's the chapter of the epilogue? 42? No, towards later. Watch this. I'm on chapter 42. Blah, blah, blah. The Lord, yeah. Verse 10. So a little bit, right? He talks about the friends, and then he says, the Lord restored Job's fortunes when he prayed on behalf of his friends, blah, blah, blah. And then he continues, there we go, verse 12. This is the best part. Then the Lord blessed the latter years of Job's life more than the former. And here we go, shopping list. He had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, 1,000 donkeys, 7 sons, 3. Tell me, where are we? Have we progressed, or are we still in the prologue? Right? Are you seeing how this epilogue sounds strangely like the prologue? Like Job is still in this dynamic of transaction. See, I was faithful and now I'm getting everything back, right? So are you seeing how this particular passage cannot be the real ending of the book? Are you seeing that? Because the book was trying to move away from this perspective, right? We had the transactional perspective, the book trying to move away, and boom, we fall back down to square one. So are you seeing how the author here, this cannot be the real happy ending of the book? Are you all seeing what I'm saying? Put your hand in the screen if you're seeing. Right, so the happy ending needs to be found in a deeper level, right? However, most interprets will say, see, Job was good, he was faithful, he hung on, and now see, he's prosperous. But we know that the whole book of Job is moving away from this transactional view. So we have to find the happy ending elsewhere. So look at the text again and tell me, do you see anything in the epilogue which strikes you as a new idea? Something shifted, and you can use that to tell me what is the real happy ending of the book. So let's start with Giannakopoulos.
You can see that it says that the daughters were named. It says he also had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he called them the name of the first Jemima, and the second, and the name of the second Keziah, and the name of the third Karen Hapuk.
Okay,
and
great.
In the beginning, we noticed that the daughters were never named, and this is important because actually, I'll let you explain why it's important.
Good, tell us. Continue. You're doing good.
Well, so in the beginning, the daughters were never named. But now that they're named, it elevates the status of women.
Yes.
Whereas before, they were no named characters, like they didn't matter at all. They were simply there to die, and that's it. Whereas now they were named, and they were actually given an inheritance as well.
Very nice.
They were put at the same level as the sons, which is really important.
Yes, Job all of a sudden has become very, he's stepping out of his culture. I mean, Job, this is really progressive in the sense of really moving beyond the culture of the time where the women were not named, they did not inherit. It's the sons who inherited, or they got through their husbands, but they never inherited. And so all of a sudden we see a Job who's able to think outside of the box, right? He's able to be subcultural. He's able to be countercultural. He's able to move beyond the limitations of culture into genuine morality and ethics, right? This is a profound shift, right? And this, in my view, is part of what is the true happy ending of Job, right? Excellent, Giannakopoulos. Rudolph, go ahead.
Is it actually written by the same author, or is the epilogue written by a different author?
None of this we know, right? So we always take the text at face value. At least that's how I do it. I take the text as written by one author. Actually, linguistically, yes, it's the same style.
Exactly.
So unity of style. And what these authors are saying, who say, there's a contradiction, can't be the same author, just think that, people in ancient times were primitive idiots with only one way of thinking, can't be complex, right? So I disagree with this view that they cannot have a complex view or be sarcastic or ironic, right? And here, this is irony, right? He's going back to the beginning just to poke fun at those, who still think that. But if we read between the lines, we see that the true happy ending is really the way that Job has changed, right? I think if you were to jot down anything, it would be that the true happy ending is not in him recovering all his goods and getting twice as much as before. That's the old model. That's the old school of religion, right? The real happy ending is the way that he has shifted, the way that he has found a new vision of God, and the way that he has found a new vision of life, and his ability now to transcend culture into something broader, right? Giannakopoulos, would you like to add?
I think a lot of people kind of trash on the Bible for being quote unquote sexist sometimes, but then they skip over these parts which are incredibly important.
Yes.
They skip over it like all the time. So here we clearly see that this is coming from the mother's house where women are being elevated in status, but it gets glossed over so easily. I mean, people obviously pick and choose in every aspect of life. So I think that's kind of what happened.
Yes, we are really straight in the mother's house. And I think I'll do a nice test question. I won't talk about it here because we don't have time, but it'll be interesting to explore how the book of Job, having studied it, really fits into the mother's house literature, right? There are many, actually, we could talk a little bit about it. Let's do that right now. 4 points of the mother. I'll just drill it into this mother's house business. So first point, right? We have the God is immanent.
Hello, this is Axel.
Huh?
Axel, Dr. Alstein calling.
Oh, Dr. Alstein, I am so
Okay, muting him. Okay, so we have, remember the mother's house, the 4 points. How would you, let's just say a few words and the rest of you will have to dig a little more for the test question, but how do you think that this book fits into the mother's house paradigm in conclusion? So Giannakopoulos, you can start us, and then Edmonds.
The redemptive arc of Job.
Okay, yes, for sure, right? This is really the broadening of his world, right? Rather than the narrowing, right, into punishments. You have a broadening into a new Job, right? Very good.
Also,
Oh,
go ahead.
Go ahead. No, Giannakopoulos, go ahead, finish.
Also, all the forgiveness that is done in this whole sequence, First, he forgave Job for all the times that he transgressed against the Lord. He also forgave the friends. He forgave the wife. It's a lot of forgiveness and chances for wisdom and evolution, as Williams would say.
Yes. Just one thing, though. God never had to forgive Job for being so unruly because God actually liked that.
You're right, yeah.
Right? There was no transgression there, right? Just like the fruit, right? Sometimes we call things sin that aren't sin. Very good. Edmonds, continue.
Yeah, so I guess I was going to point out the immersion into the world. I think that's, again, what you were saying with the broadening. I think there's a lot of discussion of just, how large this idea of God is, how large this conception is, and Job sort of learning about that rather than seeing God as just this one punitive figure, manipulating people on earth to do as he wishes. I wanted to just question, I think that this the entire book brings into question this question of intimacy, right? I think that it's not maybe as cut and dried an answer, but I think Job is wrestling with this issue of where is God? Is he why does he not intimately speak to us? Why does he not tell us this is what I have to do, this is what I don't or can't do? But I think it is resolved in a way that's favorable to this mother's house interpretation. We hear God come in and give his little talk about everything, and it feels like it's sort of an intimate moment where God is actually coming down and being talking to these people and giving them his thoughts on everything they've said, and they're all all of those participants in this conversation are learning what sort of intimacy they can expect with God.
Yeah, very nicely put. Actually, something I failed to say, but I'll say now, and connected to what you just said, is that one of the main differences between the friends of Job and Job is that the friends talk about God, but Job all along is trying to speak to God, right? So we have here the beginning of intimacy, right? Of a real relationship, of a real conversation, which the friends and most of us sadly are not capable of having, right? We are talking about God, but rarely do we really talk to God as Job has done, right? So there is an invitation here to leave behind the hearsay about God and really start our own conversation, see where it goes, right? So yes, very nicely put. I like that. Excellent. Rudolph, go ahead.
Yeah, last not least, look, I'm not sure if I have the right inclination here, but if you think what happens throughout the storyline of Job, it just came to me that it could be a play on Genesis and a repetition in a many senses of the glory, the paradise, everything is okay, to the suffering, to pulling out of the hole and becoming somewhat of a worth to the world again. Not sure if this is far out, but
you're right on. You're right on. This is a replay of what we just studied, right? We have a garden, right? So Job's closed world is like the garden, right? And we have an expulsion out of that garden through transgression into something broader. Absolutely, you can. Wow, that would be a great test question. I'm writing it down. Job as replay of Genesis, right?
I am so sorry, guys.
Oh, it's great. I love it. I think there's so much to be said about that. And by the way, same author, right? We know that we think it is believed that the book of Job was written by Moses, who also wrote, compiled the book of Genesis, right? So yes, definitely you can say that Job is a kind of variation on the theme of the Garden of Eden, and there is a lot of parallels. I love it. Really nice. In fact, I so good, I want to close on that. So thank you, Rudolph. You're closing us off. Okay, guys. What's for next time? I don't even know. What's next on the syllabus?
Ecclesiastes
1 and 2.
Okay, great. So Ecclesiastes is also a variation on the book of Genesis. You'll see. I'll leave it in suspense. I'll introduce it briefly next time when we meet. So tomorrow, please read, whatever chapters are on the syllabus. And we will begin now the book of Ecclesiastes. And I would love to introduce it, but right now feels like everybody's super tired and so am I. So I will briefly introduce it tomorrow when we get into the text. So for now, just read it and do your reading assignment. Be careful now, try to do better quality reading assignments. Questions, discomforts, no answers, right? I'm tired of your answers. I want your questions. That's the way we go deep. Okay, guys, I will stop the recording.